Imagine a world where every desire is fulfilled before it's even fully formed. A world where you never have to wait, never have to feel discomfort, never have to face silence. It sounds like paradise, doesn't it? But what if I told you that this so-called paradise is a prison, velvet-lined, yes, but a prison nonetheless? What if pleasure, once a sanctuary, has become a trap? Now look around you. Scroll through your feed. Tap your screen. The algorithm knows your cravings better than you do. Your impulses are curated, tracked, and monetized. Every moment of stillness is swiftly anesthetized by a swipe, a like, a binge. We live in a time of unprecedented comfort, unlimited entertainment, and infinite distractions. And yet, beneath the neon glow of instant gratification lies an unsettling truth. We are more anxious, more lost, and more spiritually vacant than ever before. This is the paradox Aldous Huxley foresaw nearly a century ago. In Brave New World, Huxley imagined a future not ruled by pain and fear, but by pleasure and sedation. A society so saturated in comfort and trivial delight that its people no longer questioned, dreamed, or suffered with purpose. They didn't rebel because they had no need to. They were pacified by pleasure. And in a twist of prophetic irony, we are now living in the very contours of Huxley's nightmare. Not because we were forced into submission, but because we were seduced. This is the age of euphoria, and it's killing us softly. Our ancestors struggled to survive. We struggle to find meaning. They feared hunger, we fear boredom. We have traded pain for pleasure, and in doing so, we may have discarded something vital, something deeply human. We do not suffer less, we suffer differently, silently, internally. The soul grows numb while the senses are overstimulated. Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what happens when the why dissolves into the endless how of convenience, consumption, and synthetic happiness? What happens when our lives become a pursuit of nothing more than the next dopamine hit, the next novelty, the next escape? We have become addicts, not to a substance, but to the absence of discomfort. We anesthetize ourselves with entertainment, food, sex, scrolling, shopping, anything to avoid that dreadful silence within. But in our attempt to flee pain, we have fled depth. Because meaning doesn't lie in comfort. It lies in tension, in struggle, in the pursuit of something higher than the self. Aldous Huxley did not merely write a dystopian novel. He wrote a psychological mirror, one in which we are now reflected. Look at the evidence. Mental health crises are skyrocketing. Depression and anxiety are epidemic. Our relationships are more fragile. Our attention spans are evaporating. Despite having everything, we feel emptier than ever. Why? Because we have mistaken pleasure for purpose. Because we have traded liberty for entertainment. Because we have become too comfortable to ask uncomfortable questions. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that is exactly what we do. We binge-watch to drown silence. We scroll to numb the existential itch. We seduce ourselves with simulation to avoid the unbearable weight of being. But there is a cost, and we are paying it in meaninglessness, in loneliness, in spiritual starvation. This isn't just about technology. It's about what we've become. Pleasure-chasing, pain-avoiding, soul-neglecting shadows of who we could be, and now, the question burns. If comfort has enslaved us, how do we break free? How do we reclaim meaning in an age that sells pleasure as the highest good? This is the inquiry that leads us into the next layer of Huxley's terrifying vision, and into the heart of a civilization slowly forgetting how to feel, how to think, and how to live. You are not being held at gunpoint. You are not shackled in chains. And yet, your freedom is quietly eroding, not through tyranny, but through indulgence. Aldous Huxley understood something chilling, that the most effective form of control doesn't come from external coercion, but from internal sedation. In Brave New World, the citizens weren't beaten into submission. They were lulled into it. With a little pill called soma, every unpleasant emotion, grief, anger, longing, loneliness, was instantly erased. No one suffered, and no one lived fully either. Fast forward to today. While there is no literal soma pill on every corner, there might as well be. We have our own chemical comforts, antidepressants, stimulants, sleeping pills, and our own digital equivalents. Endless entertainment, curated content, bite-sized dopamine hits. The moment reality becomes even slightly uncomfortable, we reach for escape. But here's the sinister brilliance. We think we're free because we're choosing it. We think we're happy because we're smiling. We think we're in control because we have options. Yet, we are increasingly unable to sit with ourselves, to process sorrow, to face boredom without reaching for something external. This is Huxley's nightmare. Not that we would be enslaved by force, but that we would love our servitude. Look closely at how your day unfolds. How many times do you reach for your phone? Not because you need to, but because you're avoiding the void. How often do you fill silence with sound, stillness with stimulation, discomfort with convenience? This isn't just habit. It's pathology. It's spiritual narcosis. We are becoming emotionally and existentially illiterate. We don't know how to grieve without Googling how to stop being sad. We don't know how to face solitude without filling it with noise. And worse, we're told this is normal. We are told we deserve happiness, comfort, distraction, at all costs. But in reality, we are paying a deeper price. The erosion of our humanity. Arthur Schopenhauer, that chronic pessimist with flashes of piercing clarity, once wrote, "Pleasure is never as pleasant as we expected it to be, and pain is always more painful." He understood that pleasure is fleeting, and when it becomes the core pursuit of life, suffering increases, not decreases. Because true contentment doesn't come from avoiding pain, it comes from transforming it. Yet our culture no longer teaches this. Instead, it tells us, avoid suffering at all costs. Don't look inward. Don't question. Just consume. Just escape. And so, suffering doesn't disappear, it festers. People are not becoming happier. They are becoming lonelier, more distracted, more medicated. The pursuit of comfort has turned pathological. We are overdosing on pleasure while starving for meaning. We have confused sedation with serenity and escape with enlightenment. What's worse, we've made it collective. Entire industries profit from your emptiness. They design platforms to hijack your brain chemistry. They monetize your attention, your insecurity, your loneliness. And you keep coming back, not because it nourishes you, but because you've forgotten what nourishment even feels like. This is not a glitch in the system. This is the system. And if you think you're immune, remember, this isn't about intelligence. It's about design. The architecture of your world, your devices, your news feeds, your desires, has been engineered for compliance masked as choice, for sedation masked as happiness. And so we live in a world where fewer people believe in anything real, yet more people are obsessed with image, trends, and the ever-fleeting present. We are told to live our best life, while quietly suffocating under the weight of spiritual emptiness. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But what can you make of yourself in a world that constantly seduces you to avoid becoming? We are not just numbed. We are being trained, conditioned to fear the inner world, to avoid the discomfort necessary for transformation, to prefer 1,000 empty pleasures over one meaningful pain. The soma is everywhere, not in capsules but in content, in consumerism, in convenience. And unless we wake up, we won't just lose our freedom, we'll lose our capacity to want freedom at all. So the question deepens. If the pursuit of pleasure has turned into a system of soft control, what happens to the soul that dares to resist? The answer leads us into rebellion, not with weapons, but with awareness. What if your suffering, your very anguish, is sacred? What if the very thing you're running from holds the key to your liberation? In a world obsessed with numbing pain, the greatest act of rebellion might be to feel, to let the discomfort in, to stare directly into the void and not blink. This is not romantic suffering for suffering's sake. It's about rediscovering what the soul has always known, that meaning is not found in the absence of suffering, but in the transformation of it. But this is a dangerous idea in the modern age, because pain is no longer seen as part of the human condition, it is seen as a malfunction, something to be corrected, medicated, ignored. We treat grief like a virus. We treat anxiety like a glitch in the matrix. We treat longing like a weakness to be overcome rather than a signal from the deepest part of ourselves crying out for truth. This sterilization of the soul is precisely what Aldous Huxley feared. In Brave New World, the characters are incapable of enduring loss. They don't mourn, they don't cry, they don't wrestle with despair. Instead, they pop soma and go to an orgy. They dissolve their pain into an orgy of diversion. And in doing so, they lose their humanity. Yet what is a human being without pain? Without struggle? Without longing? Viktor Frankl, who survived the unspeakable horrors of Auschwitz, once wrote, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. And that is what we have become, distraction machines. Not because we are shallow, but because we are terrified of our own depth." But here lies the path to freedom. The soul doesn't grow through sedation. It grows through friction, through the grind between what is and what could be, through wrestling with questions that have no answers, through walking into the fire of uncertainty with open eyes. Ask yourself, when did you grow the most as a human being? Was it when everything was comfortable, smooth, pleasurable? Or was it in the seasons of heartbreak, betrayal, illness, loss? When you were stripped bare, with nothing left to shield you from the rawness of existence? Those are the moments when the false layers fall away, when the ego cracks, when the shallow scaffolding collapses and you are forced to confront what remains. And it is there, in the abyss, that truth emerges. But we have been taught to fear the abyss, to cover it with content, food, sex, convenience, ideology, to never, ever look directly into it. And yet, Carl Jung taught that the only way out is through. He wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and to accept oneself completely, one must walk through shadow, not around it. To rebel in this world does not mean storming governments or rejecting civilization. It means reclaiming your inner life. It means choosing to feel what others avoid, to embrace silence where others crave noise, to seek solitude where others chase distraction, to hunger for meaning where others settle for stimulation. It means turning your pain into purpose. But beware, this path is not applauded. It is not glamorous. You will not be rewarded with applause or likes. In fact, the world may mock your depth, dismiss your stillness, pathologize your longing. But do it anyway, because the deeper tragedy is not pain. It is numbness. When you allow yourself to feel, to really feel, you begin to re-enter life as it truly is, not as it is sold. You begin to remember that you are not here to be entertained, but to be awakened. Not here to be safe, but to be transformed. And so, the rebellion begins not with anger, but with awareness. Not with escape, but with embrace. The rebellion is remembering that your pain has meaning, that your longing is holy, that your soul, if you listen closely, is still whispering. And now the question becomes urgent. If pain holds the path to purpose, what does it mean to live a meaningful life in a world that tells you only to enjoy? The answer isn't found in pleasure. It is found in responsibility, the sacred burden we are all called to carry. We are told to chase what feels good. But what if life is not about what feels good, but what is good? Responsibility. Even the word feels heavy, doesn't it? Like a burden, like something to avoid. But this is because we've been conditioned to see freedom as freedom from duty, rather than freedom through it. We've been sold a lie, that the highest life is one of leisure, indulgence, and uninterrupted pleasure. That responsibility is the enemy of happiness. But let's turn that idea on its head. What if responsibility isn't a weight that crushes you, but a weight that strengthens you? Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote with profound urgency, "The more one forgets himself, by giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human he is." In other words, meaning is born not from self-indulgence, but self-transcendence, from carrying something larger than yourself. But this is precisely what our age is allergic to: transcendence. We are told that you are the center of the universe, that your feelings are sacred, that your desires define you, But this hyper-individualism, this cult of the self, has not made us freer. It has made us lonelier, more anxious, more detached from the very things that give life gravity. Because here's the paradox. The more we avoid responsibility, the more meaningless life becomes. And the more meaningless life becomes, the more unbearable it feels. So we seek escape through comfort, through distraction, through consumption. But the escape only deepens the emptiness. Responsibility is not the opposite of freedom. It is freedom. The kind that costs you, the kind that makes you sweat, the kind that demands sacrifice. To live a meaningful life means choosing the weight you are willing to carry. Not the one imposed upon you, but the one you accept. This is what the world forgets. That responsibility isn't just about duty. It's about dignity. It's what elevates us above being pleasure-seeking machines. It's what gives shape to the formless chaos of existence. It is how we answer the fundamental question, why are you here? And yet, this question terrifies us, because it demands action. It demands that we stop consuming and start becoming. We were not designed to be passive spectators in the theater of life. We are meant to participate, to serve, to love, to create, to build, to protect, to endure. But today, responsibility has become unfashionable. Parenting, marriage, service, sacrifice. These are mocked as chains rather than honored as callings. We idolize independence, but we forget. Absolute freedom is not liberation, it is drift. And when a soul drifts, it drowns. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of this drift when he said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." In other words, if you don't choose your responsibility, someone or something will choose it for you. Perhaps an ideology, perhaps an algorithm, perhaps the very culture you think you're freely choosing. The only antidote is to voluntarily take on the weight of meaning. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Because without that weight, you remain spiritually weightless. Adrift in a sea of sensation, without anchor or aim. Responsibility gives direction. It grounds the soul. It transforms suffering into service, chaos into order, emptiness into purpose. But it requires a dangerous question. What are you willing to live and die for? And if your answer is merely comfort, convenience, or pleasure, then you are not living. You are merely surviving in slow-motion sedation. To be fully alive is to choose your burden. And here lies the call Huxley feared we would no longer hear. The call to become fully human. To embrace suffering, carry responsibility, and seek meaning beyond the self. Because in the absence of that call, we become docile, numb, distracted, just as Huxley envisioned. And so, the next question emerges, like a whisper in the dark. What is left of the soul when meaning is forgotten? And what happens when a society of comfort seekers loses its capacity to suffer with and for one another? The answer lies in the cultural decay that follows, and in the identity crisis of an age that no longer knows what it means to be human. Walk through any modern city and you'll see the signs. Not in crumbling buildings, but in crumbling souls. People who look alive but feel dead inside. People moving quickly, talking loudly, buying endlessly, but with hollow eyes. You can sense it in the air. A quiet despair, veiled beneath aesthetics and ambition. We are not starving for food. We are starving for meaning. Aldous Huxley's vision wasn't of a society that collapses through catastrophe. It was of one that decays through pleasure. Not a bang, but a whimper. Not tyranny by oppression, but by indifference. And perhaps the most terrifying part of all, a population that doesn't care that it no longer cares. That is our culture. We've lost the language of the soul. We no longer ask, what is good? Or what is true? Instead, we ask, what works for me? Or what gets me more attention? Truth is now subjective. Beauty is commodified. Even love is reduced to convenience. This isn't just cultural drift. It's existential erosion. Our art reflects it. Our humor is ironic, detached, void of wonder. Our films recycle the same spectacle. Our music is often numb or nihilistic. We worship novelty over substance, irony over sincerity, image over integrity. As long as it entertains, we don't care if it's hollow. As long as it distracts, we don't care if it degrades. But there's a consequence to this spiritual laziness. When a culture stops striving for transcendence, it starts spiraling into decadence. When it no longer honors sacrifice, discipline, and virtue, it elevates convenience, indulgence, and image. And when that happens, meaning doesn't disappear, it gets replaced, often by false gods. Think of how we now treat influencers like philosophers, brands like sacred emblems, pleasure like salvation. We idolize celebrities but ignore saints. We follow trends but neglect timeless truths. We collect experiences but avoid commitment. Everything must be fast, easy, fun, and if it's not, we discard it. Even people, even ourselves. Jean Baudrillard warned that modern life would become a desert of the real, a simulated world, more vivid than life but less alive. That world is here. Hyperstimulation masks spiritual starvation. We've created a civilization of surfaces, curated images, edited emotions, algorithmic desires. It looks vibrant, but beneath the surface it's rotting. Why? Because without a center, everything falls apart. And that center was once spiritual, anchored in mystery, reverence, responsibility. When that dissolves, so does everything that orbits it. Meaning, virtue, beauty, love. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Man is condemned to be free. Without an external structure, God, tradition, cosmic order, we are left with the crushing responsibility to construct our own meaning." But in the age of endless entertainment and shallow distractions, few rise to that challenge. They default to nihilism or worse, apathy. And so, the culture spirals. We no longer educate for wisdom, we train for utility. We no longer raise children to become whole, we raise them to be marketable. We no longer endure suffering with grace, we demand it be eradicated. But when you eliminate suffering, you eliminate the soul's ability to grow. So we produce citizens who are emotionally fragile, spiritually empty, but highly skilled in consumption and complaint. And when the soul becomes hollow, it becomes vulnerable to ideologies, to addictions, to anything that promises identity without responsibility, purpose without sacrifice, belonging without truth. This is the society Huxley warned us about, not violent but vapid, not repressed but distracted. A world where people are so comfortable they no longer question why they exist. A world that no longer produces depth, only noise. And so the question that now echoes is not just individual but civilizational. Can a culture addicted to comfort rediscover courage? Can a generation drowning in distraction recover the capacity for stillness, truth, and awe? If we don't answer soon, we may forget how to ask. Because when meaning dies, freedom follows. Not through force, but through forgetting what freedom even feels like. And yet, even now, there is a way back. A way that begins not out there, but in the quiet, often painful confrontation within. The final section will show us that path, not the easy one, but the real one. The one that leads out of sedation and into awakening. The alarms are ringing, but they're muffled beneath the noise. 1,000 screens flicker. Notifications chirp like synthetic birdsong. Another sale, another meme, another opinion. The world races on faster, louder, more. But somewhere beneath it all, buried under years of stimulation and self-forgetting, a quiet voice still whispers, remember who you are. You were not born to scroll. You were not born to be entertained, medicated, advertised to, or consumed by algorithms. You were not designed to drift through life anesthetized by comfort. You were born for something else, something harder, deeper, truer. You were born to awaken. Awakening begins where sedation ends, in silence, in stillness, in that unbearable moment where you sit alone and the echoes of all you've avoided finally catch up to you. The grief you didn't grieve, the questions you didn't ask, the longings you've drowned in distraction. This is where the return begins, not with answers, but with presence. We must unlearn what the culture has taught us. That pain is the enemy, that pleasure is the goal, that happiness is the highest good. Because real life is not sanitized. It is blood and soul, risk and loss, beauty and terror. It is uncertainty and wonder and mystery. It is the strange ache of knowing you are alive in a world that is both breathtaking and brutal, and yet choosing still to participate in it fully. To awaken is to reclaim the right to feel deeply, to suffer consciously, to hope wildly, to love despite the risk, to become fully human again. And becoming human means saying yes to responsibility, yes to limits, yes to the sacredness of your own suffering. Because the only way to find meaning is to stop running from the places where meaning is born. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to become who you truly are, you must go inward, past the noise, past the comfort, past the distractions. You must walk into the fire. That fire may be grief, or longing, or deep, unexplainable hunger. Don't run from it. That ache is not your enemy. It's your compass. It's the part of you that still remembers what it means to live with purpose, to live with soul. And when you say yes to it, when you stop numbing and start listening, you begin the slow, painful, beautiful process of resurrection. Because the soul does not die quickly. It dies slowly, quietly, through neglect. But it can also return. Not through another self-help book, not through another motivational video, but through courage. The courage to be, to feel, to stand still in a culture that never stops moving, to seek depth in an age of surfaces. And no, this path is not easy. You will lose things. You may lose convenience. You may lose the shallow highs. You may even lose friends who prefer sedation to substance. But you will gain something far more precious, yourself. And maybe, just maybe, by reclaiming yourself, you become part of something bigger. Because when one soul awakens, it stirs others. When one person begins to live from depth, they remind the rest of us what it looks like, what it feels like. And in a world that has forgotten how to feel, that is revolutionary. So where do we go from here? We go inward. We go upward. We go deeper. We choose meaning over numbness. We choose truth over convenience. We choose to carry a burden rather than be carried by culture. We reject the soma, not because we love suffering, but because we finally understand it. Because we know now what Aldous Huxley knew, that pleasure without purpose is anesthesia. That a painless world is not paradise, it's a tomb, and that the only real freedom is found not in sedation, but in sacrifice. And so, you stand at the edge. You can go back to the noise, or you can step forward into silence, into awareness, into life. Not an easy life, not a perfect one, but a real one,